Well, I just want to say good evening and welcome to our breakout session, which is focused on how to get emergency food to the most people as quickly as possible. And my name is Sham Rambar, and I'm one of the pastors at Purpose Church, and I'm co-facilitating this breakout with Council Member Victor Preciado, who just helped us, if you were in the plenary session, who just helped us to set up our discussion on reimagining our basic safety net here in the city of Pomona. As Victor shared, COVID-19 has caused all of us to rethink how we do things in our personal and corporate lives. The virus accentuated the need to aggressively work at solutions that will be in place post-COVID-19 so that we can be more ready for the regular and emergent challenges. The virus created a heightened need for food in our city, which is why we're taking time to address this important basic need in this session. Our focus today will be how to improve and build systems that can increase the capacity of Pomona families and individuals to not have to go to bed hungry. Our goal is to strengthen the connections between our food pantries, people, and organizations that can help. Our hope is that the ideas that emerge will help us strengthen our systems and begin to build new ones by March of 2021. The dream is to eventually build upon systems that we create for food security so that we can meet the other critical needs of housing, jobs, healthcare, etc. Basically, we're using food as a basis for working at some of the other issues that our community is dealing with. And so today I want to say we welcome your participation and input to ensure that no one goes hungry in Pomona. And so I want to invite you as we start out to enter questions, comments, ideas in the chat, and to make sure and hang around for the group discussion as we move forward tonight. I want to also encourage you, if you would be so kind, to put your names and email addresses in the chat so we can record them. And our hope is that we can use them for follow-up connection with you as our group moves forward to do some action on dealing with this issue that we're going to be talking about today. I just want to remind you that this breakout is being recorded so that we can best review all the wonderful insights that we will gain from one another. At this time, I would like to invite Council Member Victor to introduce our panelists and ask the first round of questions. Victor?
Hello again, everyone. Thank you for having me. And at this moment, I am pleased to introduce our panelists for this evening. First up, and we were practicing it if you got here early enough, is Augusto, also known as Goose Dolce. He's the operations director at God's Pantry. Next is Cami Grosvenor, president and CEO of Hope Partners. And finally, Benita DeFrank, Neighborhood Services Director, City of Pomona. Panelists, please take a couple of minutes each to introduce yourself and the programs that you represent. Benita, how about we start with you, then we'll go with Cami, and then we'll leave Goose towards the end. Thank you, panelists.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, my name is Benita DeFrank. I'm the Neighborhood Services Director for the City of Pomona. And basically under my department, we have three divisions. We have the Housing Authority, which provides rental assistance, and our homeless unit is also embedded in there. We have Housing Services, which provides rental assistance and also provides first-time home buyer and our community development block grant, a lot of our federal grants to households. And then finally, our community services division, and that's all of our parks programming. So if the city is interfacing in your neighborhoods, it's usually through my department.
Thank you. Cami?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to meet with you. I am Cami Grosvenor here at, from Inland Valley Hope Partners. I've been with the organization since 2013. I first joined as the Director of Development and Communication, and then succeeded our previous CEO at her retirement in late 2018. For those of you that aren't familiar with Hope Partners, for more than 50 years, we've been serving the food and housing needs of no and low income families and individuals in the Pomona Valley. We operate 5 local food pantries, 2 in Pomona. One is hosted at Purpose Church and 1 at Urban Mission. And then we have locations in Ontario, Claremont, and San Dimas. We also have 2 once per month food distributions, 1 in Chino and 1 in Upland. At our food pantries, it's a pretty traditional model. Food insecure families and individuals are able to access about a 5-day supply of food for each member of their household. And then we try to provide fresh fruits and other produce as we can, almost every time they come as it's available. And households typically come about every 30 days, though with COVID happening, we've increased that to every 2 weeks, people can come for assistance. We also provide housing assistance to families and single women who are experiencing homelessness. We have our house family shelter, which is actually located in the city of Pomona. And we also offer a rapid rehousing program. Both of these programs help households stabilize, increase income, and move from homelessness to permanent housing. We also, as funding permits, provide rental assistance for at-risk families so that they don't fall into homelessness. I would say that right now, this is one of the biggest needs that we are experiencing, at least based on the phone calls that we're getting. And we're pleased to say that we are currently collaborating with Benita and her team to provide their eviction prevention program here in Pomona. So that's very exciting right now. Finally, Hope Partners operates a couple healthy living programs with the goal of helping our neighbors access more fresh, healthy fruits and vegetables. We operate the Pomona Valley Certified Farmers Market every Saturday morning at Purpose Church, and this is one of the only farmers market locally that accepts WIC and EBT and some of those other federal nutrition benefits as payments. Plus, we offer the market match program, which increases these consumers' buying power so that they can get more fresh fruits and vegetables for their families. And finally, we partner with Amy's Farm in Ontario, and we operate a backyard gleaning program, again, to bring more fresh fruits and vegetables to families that are food insecure.
Thank you very much, Cami. Goose, your turn.
Hey, everyone. I'm Goose Dolce. I'm the operations director of God's Pantry. We're located, our warehouse is located in Pomona. We primarily serve the city of Pomona, but we also have, historically, we had distributions in around 6 different cities around the LA County, San Bernardino, and Riverside County. With COVID, obviously, we have to, in campus shutting down, we have shifted our approach and we moved to primarily a drive-through distribution. We're slowly kind of getting back out there. We serve roughly 15 to 2,000 families on a weekly basis. And then we also, on top of our food pantry operations, we are getting more involved in workforce development, especially working with at-risk transitional age youth. We opened up a care center where we offer free resources, therapy, counseling, case management to a lot of the youth in the area. And what we try to do is just kind of get them out of that. Once they turn 18, they start kind of falling through the cracks. We just offer supportive services, wraparound services to them, get them working, get them housed, get them the documents they need, get them into school, get them the benefits that they already qualify for, and then just try to get them, prevent them to falling into homelessness, gangs, and drug abuse. We somewhat recently started transitional age youth housing. We have some residents that live with us, and they kind of partake on all the services that I just talked about. But primarily, again, kind of what pays the bills is our food operation. That's kind of why I'm here. And yeah, I guess we'll talk a little bit more about kind of how COVID changed soon, but that's what we do. God's Pantry is primarily a food pantry in Pomona.
What I would like to say about all 3 partners and our panelists today is all of them prioritize boots on the ground and as much as in-person interaction as possible at a safe distance. It's just, it is what we're dealing with at the moment. But I like it that they put their sleeves up and we work nonstop. So we do have some questions for the panelists and with regard to our topic today. Benita, we'll be starting with you. When you think of basic needs in the city of Pomona, what number of families or maybe percentage of the population would you say are struggling to meet their basic needs? And then based on those numbers, what percentage are we truly able to help? What sources are you using to make that determination?
Thank you. So since the onset of COVID, this topic of focusing on those most in need has become really the center of what we do here in the city. And to do that, we've had to rely on a lot of, on whatever information we can find, whether it's through census. There's a lot of social mapping models that are out there that are actually have popped up as a result of COVID that we've been able to look at and try to focus our resources. But one of the things that we really have had to do is find new ways to listen to our residents and to our community partners that provide us with the insight that we need to figure out who is it that we're going to serve. So in Pomona, we have a 20.7% poverty rate. That means 1 in 5 of our neighbors are living in poverty, which is over 30,000 people within the city. And when you look at that from a household perspective, we're looking at about 6,000 households. And the majority of those households are renters. So we're dealing with not only food insecurity, but we're also dealing with financial insecurity from a renter's perspective. And these households usually have an income of less than 36,000. So that's kind of the mark of when you're looking at poverty level. Even, they were at 36,000 prior to COVID, and they were barely making ends meet. And then with COVID, those decisions now of what to do with resources have now come down to choices between rent and food, utilities and medication, work and childcare, and if their job is still available. So these are the households we're focused on. And initially, we've dedicated about $1.5 million to provide rental assistance, but that amount really can only realistically help 500 to 600 households, or about 10%. So when you look at what resources the city can bring, we're only going to be able to help about 10% of the families. So that's why it's so important that to approach this time period of COVID, we have to approach it in partnership. And we as a city, we can only assist with our limited resources, but in working with community partners, those resources multiply. And so the huge problem with the elephant in the room that when we're always talking about this is, if we can't find a way to stabilize families today, that we're going to be overwhelmed with helping them reclaim housing on the back end in March. And that's 100 times harder to do, is to reclaim lost housing than to prevent homelessness. So that's, it's a big order. That's 6,000 families. It's a lot. But I think together, at least we can start to work, especially on those most in need first, those who are most likely to end up on the streets, when the rent eviction moratorium lifts.
Thank you, Benita. And speaking of our strong partners, Cami, your organization helps to address a lot of these basic needs that we have here in the city. Could you tell us some of the frustrations that you have when you try to help people, and also what do you see that's working well for your organization?
Sure. I think Benita hit it on the head there a little bit, that there are limited resources available for all the people that need it. There is a great need. One of the things that I mentioned before is that we tell people they can come once every 30 days typically, or once every 2 weeks now in these challenging times. But that's to conserve our resources. We know that there's other safety net programs out there that if they need more than the 5 days of food that we provide them, we provide resources for them to get those other things, get to those other pantries and other distributions, because we know there's a great need out there. And we just want to make sure that everybody's fed. Another frustration that came to mind that may or may not resonate with people in this group, but for the provider side, we've been in it for about 50 years or so. And so as you grow, we get funding from a variety of different sources. And so sometimes there's documentations that we need from our clients to satisfy our funders. And this can sometimes hinder how flexible we can be in these situations such as COVID. So for example, we receive funding and in-kind donations of food and other things from faith communities, individuals, and corporations. And typically that's without restrictions, but we also receive a fair share of funding from government sources and from foundations. And they want certain deliverables on how many people we serve and the demographics of these people. For example, if they're 30% LMI or less, or 80% or less, there's all those different measurements they want, or if they reside in a certain city, the size of their household, et cetera. And so while we understand this need, they want a return on their investment, and it's perfectly understandable that they want these deliverables. And believe me, we are thankful for the money to keep the lights on, pay the limited staff that we have, and provide all these direct services. But it means that sometimes we do have to ask clients for documentation, such as proof of income, proof of where they live, some form of ID for people, so we know they're not saying they're a household of 8 when they're really a household of 4, all of those kind of things. And we don't do it every visit, but we ask for it annually just to verify their demographics and make sure that we are reporting accurate information back to our funders. We never turn anyone away for service because they fail to provide this documentation, but we do try to get it so we can keep our funding coming in and make sure that we have the resources we need to meet the needs of the community. So one of the frustrating things with COVID is that we have had clients get upset with us for asking us for these documents, because there's so many limited contact drive-through food distributions that are being offered. And there's so many churches and service groups and others that have jumped into this space because everybody's aware of what a great need there is. So while we've been grateful that people who need food assistance are getting it and they're being fed, we haven't really been able to adapt our distribution model maybe as much as we want because we don't have the flexibility with some of our funding. And so one of the things that concerns us is that as some of the newer sources of food for the community are coming in to serve this immediate need temporarily, they might not be here in a few years when hopefully this is behind us and we're all doing better on better financial footing. And so we're interested to see how these new innovations might impact our business and others as we maybe modify moving forward. So anyways, that's kind of a little sidebar, but I thought that might be of interest to some of you. What's working well? I think there's a lot of resources available right now. Like I said, there's a lot of faith communities that have jumped in. It's not just the players that have been in here for a while. There's many people jumping in to serve. And so I think that people who need food right now are primarily being able to find it. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of them are. I think people in our community are very good at spreading information word of mouth. I can't tell you how many times we get phone calls from people who go, I don't know what you do, but my neighbor said I need to call you because I need help. And then we have to dig and go, okay, well, what's your situation? What's going on? What service are we going to be best providing for you? And so it's good to know that the people in the community are aware of the resources and are willing to share that information and spread the awareness here in the community. I've also seen some growth in the communication and collaboration among service providers. And I think that's very encouraging because that's key as we move forward. I think too often, so many of us can operate in silos and be unaware of what others are doing in the community to combat the same or at least related issues to what we are working on as well. And our agency was founded on collaboration. We're big believers in it. And so I think that's really, truly what we're going to need to get a handle on the challenges that Pomona is facing.
No, that was wonderful. I mean, the collaboration is key because the one thing that you would hate to do is when somebody goes up to you seeking hope is that you turn them away right at the very beginning and that you don't offer an alternative. Not offering an alternative too many times, we know that if they get turned down once, it's going to be less likely that they'll seek for help again. And then when you're
Absolutely.
talking about the wall and the barriers of sometimes needing documentation, a lot of these people, some of them, they live on the streets. They
Yeah.
might lose them. You know, Goose, I'm about to ask you a question, but I know that we've talked about, you know, can we have community lockers or something available just so that they can keep in a safe location their documentation and be able to return back to it at a future time. Benita and I have talked many times, and man, I praise our city department because it is turning and grabbing, piecing together funding from maybe 10, 20 different sources, and you got to break it down to one accessible application. So with that said, Goose, what has kept you going during COVID-19 to continue to get food to people in need? And what adjustments did you have to make?
I think personally, I remember it feels like a decade ago, but I remember in the beginning of COVID, we met as a board, it's God's Pantry's board, and we said, look, we can shut down and just, you know, it'll be understandable for us to shut down and just be safe, or we can step up to the plate and really just try to make a dent, or at least collaborate and just be able to be somewhere. I think we've done a great job. Our output grew from 2,500 families a month to almost doing that every week, with the same amount of staff, essentially the same funding. But we couldn't have done it without a lot of the partners. I mean, again, we're all going back to collaboration. I think Vic, I knew you from like maybe one time we kind of ran into each other, but like I feel like I known you forever now. Like I see you pretty much every other day at the warehouse, and just working with. I got to meet all these people that are working with the city, and just kind of seeing the heart. Like I lived in a few different places, and I can never tell you that I ever met my council member, I never met my mayor, I never met anybody. And in the 18 months that I've been living here in Pomona, I feel like I'm so much more involved. I feel like there's such a huge spirit of collaboration, and it's been really fun. So that initially, like I wanted always to be a part of a team. So I feel like that's been, to me, kind of personally what's been driving us, at least as an organization, has been kind of that, the fact that we feel like we're a part of a team, and that we're being not recognized, but we're being seen, and we can actually contribute in a meaningful way. And then like what changes we have done, we very quickly, we knew we had to adjust, and there was different evolutions of our system. We came up with a system that's at least for now works very, very well. And it's pretty much, again, it's hacked together. It's low tech to a point, and it works. Like we figure out people, and especially a lot of people are your best teachers. They always will try to figure out a way how to kind of get through the system, how to take advantage of the system. So we learn a lot how to make it, or how to make it as foolproof as possible. One of the things for us we didn't want is we wanted to try to be as safe as possible for our volunteers and our guests. So we came up with a way where people can pre-register online. We can gather all the information that the food banks need, and for us just to be able to cross-reference to the license plate of the car that they drive up. So without even talking to them, we can identify who they are, how many people in the house, so we know what they're getting. And then two, kind of the big one was well, I guess two more things. The other one was the appointment system. So we came up with, kind of through trial and error, we came up with a way where people can make an appointment to come and get food. And then we realized if we can get about 70 to 80% of our clients following the system, that we didn't need the police to get involved to do traffic control. We can keep the line to about 20 cars max. So it kept everybody, it kept us safe, and it kind of kept, our neighbors from being disrupted. But also, kind of one of the benefits from that is that really nobody had to wait more than 10, maybe 15 minutes in line to get the food that they needed. And then if we had a drive up, we can always address them and help them. We never really turn anybody away. But the fact that we had a system and that there was some sort of structure, it helped to make sure our volunteers were not feeling overwhelmed, that everybody was safe. And then at the end of the day, that everybody was getting food that they needed. And I think third, kind of the big one too, was kind of the partnership that we have, where we're you came up with a way to get those that may not be able to come to a distribution, the shut-ins, the seniors, people taking care of young kids, families. So we were able to, through your efforts and your system, to come up to a way to deliver to them, to the point where we're doing, you're doing 600 deliveries every week. So I think it was a very low tech, very organic, emergent kind of way of doing it. Could it be better? Of course. I think we can all benefit from a more robust system where we can be more agile and be able to deliver quickly to those that need. But I think the system that we have now, I only hear good things about it. So it's been, it's been good.
Well, and one of the great things about it is you send in a text and within 24 hours, you have food. And, and I think Cami and yourself mentioned it, is that the fastest way to get food to people is through accessibility and tearing down barriers. And the city does that through partners in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as when we're distributing food, yes, they might not have a vehicle to drive, but also a lot of people, when they get infected through COVID, they say you have to shut in for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so most people don't have the preparation of food to be able to hold it off for 2 weeks. And, how do we improve our communication? Sean, would you like to please lead on to the next questions? I'm not sure if you're on mute, Sean.
This next question is for Benita. Benita, as you reflect on the families that you serve, what are some of the issues that keep them from accessing resources?
Yeah, there's actually been a lot that we had to overcome, even though a lot of what we're doing is the service. We haven't done it at the capacity that we're doing it now. So one of the big barriers was that we're local government, and that people don't trust us. So the people who know how to or who have accessed our resources know that we're there, and we can help people. Those who haven't, they don't know, and they don't trust us. We've also faced some information barriers where usually the way we disseminate information isn't really getting, the usual ways aren't really getting to those who need them most. For example, most of our programs we put on our website, and then if we want to promote something, we use Facebook and social media and push it out electronically. But that doesn't work for families who don't have internet, or for families who aren't part of these types of social media pages. So we've had to rethink how we get information out. Another barrier was trying to provide like regular programming in irregular times. So for us, an example, like our senior meal program, we were used to doing it one way. Seniors come to the community center and they have a lunch and they get together, and we have other social things that occur. Well, when COVID hit, seniors weren't leaving their houses. And so, but they still needed lunch, because it was a nutrition program that was sometimes their only source of nutrition. And so we had to rethink, and we had to retool, and we had to become a food delivery service, which was not something that we were used to doing. And we literally were delivering meals until we found a vendor that did that, because even the county, the funding source hadn't, they were doing it one way, and they weren't set up to do food delivery either. So, but what happened as a result of that is we went from serving 15,000 meals from, say, April to September, and now we've served 30,000 meals in the same. So we've doubled our capacity to be able to provide meals, and we have staff that calls up the seniors every single week, and we still try to make that connection, because we know they weren't just coming to our program for food, they were coming to our program for companionship as well. So we want to make sure that we reach out. Another barrier, and I will echo what Cami said, is that all the funding we have comes with regulations and a need for documentation. And that scares people off. Again, they don't trust us. So we've really tried to remove some of these barriers. So we've partnered with organizations like Cami's because they're trusted in the community, and they can do the outreach and they can collect the information. And it's more of a friendly face that's in the neighborhood as opposed to City Hall. A lot of our efforts have really worked as a result of the mayor's COVID committee and meeting, even though, I mean, I've been in City Hall for 20 years. October was my 20-year anniversary. And I know I've collaborated with pretty much every organization, but I've never seen the level of collaboration that I've seen now in the past 6 to 9 months. And then meeting on a weekly basis, we're not only being able to disseminate information, but we're also being able to get real-time feedback if it's working or not. And that makes a huge difference. Just to give you an example of where we weren't being able to access, had to do with documentation and immigrant status. And the first round of rental assistance, we had to ask the question of, were you, the documentation you have. And as a result of that, if somebody didn't have documentation, we had to reduce their level of rental assistance. And that wasn't what we wanted to do, is what we had to do as a result of the funding. But what we found is, if we don't ask the question as local government, and we let our organizations ask the question, they don't have to ask the question. So we were able to help many more. So as these barriers come up, and even new barriers that even the funding, they're coming up with new regulations as they give the funding out. And we now we have an opportunity to work with our community members and say, okay, these are the parameters, and can you find a way to do it better than us? And can we work with you in partnership? So the barriers have actually led to finding new ways to operate and to get the resources out, because it doesn't do any good for us to keep the resources within City Hall, because that's not our job. Our job is to get them out into the community. So barriers have become opportunities.
That's great, Benita. And I think for a lot of organizations, they've found that in dealing with COVID, it has caused them to innovate in some new ways. So that's exciting. And you should be the face of City Hall, and then everybody will feel warm and welcome. So I think we need to change that face of City Hall. Cami, if you could devise a more perfect way to get food to people in need as quickly as possible, what might that look like, and what elements might it include? And I know you've touched a little bit on some of that, but maybe you can rehash that a little bit.
Sure. I don't know if there's a more perfect way to do the work. I think there's a lot of different models out there, and they all serve the needs in different ways. But if your measure of success is getting the food out to the people who need it as quickly as possible, I think you look to some of the well-established disaster relief organizations and how they show up on a scene and get the job done. So my knowledge is that they typically divide an area up into strategic zones, and they work in collaboration with people in that community, the organizations that already have, their fingers in there. They know the community. They get the data points to find out who is most in need, what neighborhoods need it the quickest, where it's going to be most effective and most needed. And they bring those services directly into the neighborhoods that need them. So I think it would require an uninterrupted supply of bulk food, because that's typically, when we were all struggling to buy food for our own families, the pantries and the food regional food banks had limited stock as well. And so that was a concern. Luckily we were okay, and most organizations I'm aware of were okay, but it did get a little like, uh-oh, is there going to be enough food to go around here? And so you would need that steady supply of food coming in. You would need a complete network with reach into the various parts of the city so that all residents could access the food, ideally within a short walk, because as Goose and Benita mentioned, there's so many barriers to people, and we've even come into contact with that when we had to move our location from where we were previously to your church, Sham, is that some people now had to take 2 bus rides over to our location. And when we give them a whole week's worth of groceries to carry back on the bus with them, that's not super easily done. So that is a challenge and a barrier for people. So I think it would involve many contact and access points, including pantries such as ours, maybe schools and community centers, faith communities, the government. There's so many different healthcare centers and clinics. There's a lot of different points that could play a role in this, and bring in that holistic approach that you're talking about, is building upon this safety net to bring other services to families that need it. And so it would take a huge collaboration of organizations and individuals, and really bringing in that funding and that collaboration in food to make it possible. I'd like to pose to you also, which I had it cleared with you, but that maybe the measure for success isn't so much just the speed at which we get it out to the community, but we need to look at the whole person and what their needs are. There's a developing trend within this industry that we need to be looking at the quality and nutritional value of the foods that we're offering people. We need to be thinking about the cultural familiarity of the foods that we are providing people, and whether they know how to cook them or they have the means to cook them and prepare them for their families. Just one example that came to mind as I was thinking on this question earlier was when COVID first happened and the schools closed down, our local school district kept their free lunch programs going. But they encouraged all the kids in the neighborhood to come because they wanted, or they needed, a certain number of people to come through each day in order for the district to keep it open. So they were encouraging everybody. So my husband's here with 3 kids all day long. So he loaded the kids up and said, let's do a field trip to the school and do a drive-through, just to change the scenery for a little bit. And did take advantage of some of the food that day. And I was really pleased to find out we live in a primarily Asian neighborhood, and they had edamame and rice cups and other foods like that, along with like a turkey sandwich and, more basic foods that, we're all familiar with, apples and stuff. But I really appreciated that the foods they were offering to the kids were culturally sensitive, because I know how important that can be because of the work I do here. So just, I just wanted to pose that to everybody, also, we need to take into account the dietary needs of the people that we're serving. There's a lot of gluten and peanut allergies right now. And there's a lot of people in our community who have diabetes and high blood pressure, and that requires a specialized diet too. So sometimes the speed at which we get it out isn't as important as making sure that it really truly fits the needs of the people that we're serving. So sorry to take you on a little bit of a tangent there, but I thought those are all issues that the people in this group might want to be aware of and take into account as we discuss our safety net and improving it, and make sure that we're holistically meeting the needs, the food and nutrition needs of the people we intend to serve.
I mean, that is so awesome. That is so comprehensive in so many ways, and gives us a lot to think about as we look ahead to really moving this forward. And I love all of it. So thank you so much.
Just a little pearl, pearl of wisdom in there for us.
Yeah. So that's awesome. And Goose, I know you've talked a little bit about it, but you worked with Victor on meeting the needs of people through a texting system. How did that work, and what are some things that you would do to refine it? And I know you've touched a little bit on it, but maybe you can add a little bit more.
Hard to tell. Like I honestly, Victor's being the one that's kind of been spearheading that project, and I know that I talked to Victor some late nights, and he's still working through the Google spreadsheet, entering names. So I think the system itself it's brilliant in the sense that it's just simple. It's just a text. A couple of worries that I told Victor this, like quarantine, initially it was supposed to be 40 days. Like we never knew how long this is going to be. Well, actually, we always assumed that it was going to be shorter than it actually ended up being. And maybe to a point we're still assuming that it's going to end soon, where we may have no idea when it will wrap up. One of the concerns that I brought to Victor is just burnout, because Victor is kind of running this, and a lot of times he's short on volunteers and he's still doing deliveries. You know, he does deliveries all day, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm like, hey Vic, like we need to get you some more help. Like, I don't want you to burn out, because if you burn out, like, then people will stop, like, then the whole program falls apart. Like, nobody else is going to kind of take over. So I think that the system, I don't know, maybe we just never sat down and try to expand the system and make it, maybe assign people to take over some of the more admin side of the tasks. I think mobilizing volunteers, maybe a bigger team of volunteers would have been good. I mean, spreading the load. I don't know if the bottleneck was really at the warehouse in the picking up. I think maybe the bottleneck was going out and doing deliveries, and maybe Vic jump in anytime. But I think the bottleneck was maybe more just doing the driving. So if we had more drivers, we could have easily taken care of more people in less time. It has been brought up to my attention and as a feedback that, you know, when you're delivering the food, sometimes you get to see where people live. And then if you're haven't been really involved in food ministry or food, you know, assistance, like you may, you have this knee jerk reaction to say, does this person really need the food? Like, should he be getting the food? Should we be giving it to somebody else? Even when we have drive-through distributions, I mean, I've seen some really nice cars come through, and some of our volunteers are like, are they allowed? Should they be doing this? And should we not? And what I always kind of go back to, even before COVID, some people make decisions or stuff happens to them. They make good decisions, and life happens. They lose a job, they get divorced, something happens. And as much as you want to, like, you can't eat a car and you can't eat a house. So just because that's what you have doesn't represent your need at that moment. So kind of just from the very beginning, we, as an organization, we just decided to, I mean, I think it was the right decision, but we just always kind of stumped that as, you know, as it comes out. I was like, hey, we don't make any judgment calls. It's whoever comes, we're going to serve them. So I don't know. Again, all that to say is that I think the system works great. I think we can always make it better, but I don't know. Vic, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, I know that's what I think. I'm like, yeah, it's successful, but it's always like, how do we make it better? Somebody talked about it. I really liked the chat. They put, has anybody done an overlapping map of like the needs and which territories are being covered throughout the city? And partnerships are essential to that, because one thing that helps, for example, on Thursdays, is that over in at the Lopez, we were doing it at Urban Mission, and now we're doing it at Lopez Urban Farm, but we can identify, I mean, we can still do it in both and do it in others, is that on Thursdays, Lopez Urban Farm actually takes over District 2 for me. And what I mean by, so our city is divided by 6 districts, and when I'm working on the spreadsheet, that's how I divide most of the deliveries. And so if they can take that whole chunk, it helps. Even if we can become a drop-off spot for like maybe some of the locations where Cami is available, where people will be able to walk to, they might not be able to walk to God's Pantry, but they can walk to the areas that Cami and her partners can serve. And then maybe we just show up and drop off 2 pallets of food or something like that. One of the great things right now is, and like you said it, you can't eat cars, you can't eat a house. And so what I try to tell my volunteers is they're asking for food, and that's hunger, and that's a basic thing. And I don't see anybody choosing to scam over a box of $20 worth of food. And then I really like, Cami, how you talked about the appropriation of food. I call them las señoras, the moms out there who will say, Victor, I only want fresh food, or Victor, I only want canned food. And thanks to our partners, we're always able to, I asked them to send in their dietary restrictions, and we do our best to adjust to them as best as we can. But, you know, talking about working together, Sham, I'm gonna head over to the community participation section.
Mm-hmm.
Benita, how important is it for the community to get together to address basic needs in Pomona? And what are some elements that are needed to make that work?
Well, for me, I think the only way that we make a dent in what faces us, and this isn't going to go away, January 1st, there's a reset button. So I think that the only way we can really face it is working together. Yes, the city has access to resources, and that's one of the things when sitting in the mayor's COVID, everyone was talking about the money that we got and how we were going to use it. But money is it's limited when you're talking about, like I said, $1.5 million. That's only 500 households with 6,000 that we know are living at poverty or below, let alone those who may have now fallen into that, because that doesn't take into account everyone who's lost their job in the past 9 months. So by working together, I think that we can identify limitations and create opportunity. So for something that I can't do as a city, I can find a partner like we did with the rental assistance. I think what we're facing is big. People are in need, and they, whether it's financial assistance, food, childcare, PPEs, even stress relief, people are in need. And I mean, it wasn't that long ago that neighbors were in need of toilet paper. I mean, that was even the basic needs wasn't being met. So, and many times people don't know where to go, especially if this is the first time. If you've never asked for assistance, I mean, if you've never been to the DPSS office, or you've never had to ask for CalFresh, or you've never been to a food bank, you don't even know where they are. And this may be your first time, and there's sometimes there's some maybe shame realized in, I can't take care of my family, and so people don't. So I think that one way we go about, I think, is if everyone in Pomona saw themselves as an interventionist, if everyone knew where resources or made it a point to find where one point of resource is in my neighborhood. And then when a neighbor asked, you'd be able to share, because those are the stories that I heard of a neighbor listening to their neighbor in the apartment up front, and how they said, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to pay this rent. And they said, well, did you know that the city's offering rental assistance? That person would have never known that if it weren't for the neighbor that was living in back of them. So I think that it's not just about not-for-profits, or not just about churches, and it's about all of us becoming an interventionist in our own community. And the biggest thing is to be able to share information. And I think that we need to be open to listening. That's one of the things that I've really had to work on, is that we're so used to doing things a certain way because it's the way we've done them. And now we've had to relearn how to do and how to be solution oriented. And spending a lot of time on finding blame doesn't really get us anywhere. It's being more solution oriented. Because to me, COVID's affected everyone. It doesn't really matter whether you live in Ganesha Hills or whether you live in Angela Chancellor, your life has been affected one way or another. And I think that we all just need to be sensitive to that. And again, I think the biggest thing that I learned is if you can be the source of information, that's the biggest gift you can give to one of your neighbors.
Well, and to kind of touch on what just was mentioned in the chat right there, is when you're talking about the distribution of information, I think we have also reached out to many of the landlords and managers, and letting them know that rental assistance to their tenants means that they'll be able to pay the mortgage for the go right ahead.
Yeah. And that was one of the big things that we found was in a lot of the rooms that we were sitting in, the landlords were kind of being the the bad guys because they were wanting their rent. And we weren't hearing the stories of the landlords that were saying, if you can pay 50%, just whatever you can pay, you know, we weren't hearing those stories. We were only hearing the bad guy stories. And so we did reach out to those landlords and we let them know about the program, but we also created a group for them so that we realized we didn't know how to get in touch with our landlords. And so that was an opportunity. Again, this has created a lot of opportunities that we didn't need to do before, and now it's created a new way of doing business. And I think that the landlords are grateful, and they are the ones that are referring. We've heard several of the people who have applied learned about the program from their landlord and letting them know.
I think in a way for us to also change as we're working together and making our safety net stronger through partnership is that I think prior to COVID, many of us didn't share other organizations' information because we didn't want them doing our work because we are doing our work. And now during COVID, it's no, like, I can't help you, but they can help you. And they can't help you in that sense, but we can help you. And so sharing our information together, it's just increasing our foot traffic network and being able to reach out to more people and help them out. And with that said, Cami, if you had all the food you needed and most likely all the money that you had and you had to get it out as quickly as possible, what would it require for you to do that?
You know, really, it all comes down to capacity. That's so much of what we're talking about here today. It's just the capacity. As Goose was saying, he's worried about you getting burnt out. You know, we worry about the volunteers that have been able to remain, because we did lose a lot of volunteers at this, especially at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic and the stay-at-home orders, because they're seniors. You know, we had a lot of volunteers that are retirees, and because of health reasons and because of their age, they had to stay in place. And so it really is all about the capacity. So I think if you're looking to distribute food as effectively and quickly as possible, it's really going to come down to building that network of committed organizations and individuals, whether it's staff, whether it's volunteers, you know, from all the different groups, and getting them organized and ready to serve. You know, it's going to take collaboration, some leadership, training. You've got to choose, you've got to bring in those data maps that we've been talking about, and really choosing those proper facilities in each section of the city that's going to meet the needs of the most amount of people in that city, that's easily accessible in that section of the city. There's a lot of planning that's going to go into it. You know, you got to develop those effective communication channels, which you've started doing so well already with your texting program. So there's the start of these things happening. It's just bringing it all together, I think. You know, it's all the logistics, ensuring the proper cold food storage, because we want to give them, you know, those good nutritious foods that often require refrigeration. It's having vehicles and drivers there to distribute the food to the different locations. There's just all those little variables that come in that really take the coordination and collaboration of everybody working together. And so it'd really take a team of volunteers, and you got to have some paid staff when it's this big of an operation, to really directly deliver those services to the families and the clients who need it. And so it's definitely not a tiny undertaking that we're talking about, but I think just this conversation tonight, everybody's willingness to be here and to see what part they might play in this arena is really a great first step. This is a really important conversation to increase the collaboration and really build our safety net for the people here of Pomona.
People power, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Goose, there are people who have joined us and are interested in getting involved. You know, how do we increase that capacity with the issue of getting emergency food to people in need as quickly as possible? Where do you suggest they start to get going and in order to get involved?
Yeah, I will echo what Benita said. I think that it's, if anything that COVID showed me personally, I think it's our personal responsibility to educate ourselves, to become, like, what does it mean to be a better neighbor? Like, even to just the people that live around us, the people that we might encounter. So I think a lot of the times it's responsibility to figure out what are the resources that are out there. And that's one of the barriers, is that it's not easy. to know. I almost kind of compare it to like CPR or like a first aid. Like what do you do if somebody breaks a bone? Like you should have like a snap reaction. It's like, well, you know, for us to be like, oh, well, housing call 211, do this, do that. So I think part of it is like, one, take time to try to educate yourself, like figure out like what are the resources that are available around you. And again, you don't have to have a solution for everything, but I think if you have a few things in your pocket that you can always pull out, and then you start looking for those things more and more. And then two, again, there's, we are, you know, because of COVID, we're limited on our capacity to take volunteers, but a lot of times, like, and I think Kenny will probably say this, we're so caught up like ourselves, like trying to run an organization, that a lot of times we don't see kind of like what's happening on the streets, and it takes somebody to come up and say, hey, I have this, you know, I have a neighbor, can I come get food? Like, how can I help? How can I contribute to this, that we're at capacity to you, instead of me coming out and saying, hey, I'm here to, just to feel good about myself. I just want you to kind of cater to me, like, you know, show me, you know, tell me what to do. And a lot of times I'm like, I wish I had time to like really kind of handhold. But a lot of times being flexible, being very willing to just kind of jump in and serve wherever it's needed. Like maybe we need somebody to clean the trucks or gas them up, like drive the truck and gas them up. Or I think, again, one of the things that God's Pantry has come up to be is like, I have a hard time describing exactly what we do, is because we just see a need and we just try to figure out a way how do we solve it. And working with the youth kind of just came out through kind of figuring out this COVID thing. Like the big event we did for Thanksgiving, or not Thanksgiving, but Halloween, like, yeah, it kind of fits in our lane because it's kind of food related, but I'm like, hey, how can we bring some sense of normalcy to the families? Like, how can we bring a little bit of joy, a little bit of hope? And I think like if we all chip in, and this is something that I've seen with you and the city, is like there is an army of people out there that are willing to do the work. And I think us as leaders, is just for us to be able to kind of put the pieces in the chessboard, and then just let people, just empower people to kind of fulfill their mission. So, and then in more practical ways, just reach out to different organizations, figure out like what the need is. It may not always be posted, but you can still ask. And again, always be willing to just jump in and just do whatever it takes.
Benita, I apologize because I know that we're on here as a panelist, but I'll put my council member hat really quick for a little bit. Just ask that you maybe at the next mayor's COVID meeting, that maybe we got to look at ourselves as institutions. And you just shared it in the chat, but you know, just like we create a list of resources for those in need, maybe we create a list of partnerships for our partners, and so that they are aware of who to share collaboration with. Sham, would you like to take over a little?
Well, Victor and guests, and we're coming up very close to our 8 o'clock wrap-up time. And one of the goals that we had was to really field some questions, but there's been some really good stuff on the chat, and we will capture those. But I think the biggest thing that I would like for us to maybe consider is if there's anybody here with us tonight that would really like to help us. Some great ideas have come out. Some ideas of maybe collaborating citywide, breaking up the city into chunks and divide and conquer, so to speak. And so there's been some really good stuff. And I just feel like we just don't have enough time to pull all of those, so at least start pulling some of those together tonight, because our panelists have been so fabulous. They have shared out of their ministry life, they've shared out of their heart for our city and for the people. And I just feel like we need to move this into a place where we can really start taking some of the bits and pieces and really working at it in a really comprehensive way, and just start moving forward. Because I really feel like COVID has given us the impetus to to really look at some of the future challenges that we might have as a city. And so if we could use this as as a tool to help us really build this safety net with organizations, with the city, with individuals, with churches, with schools, universities. If we could do this, I think we might be able to solve some of the other stuff, not just food, but maybe some of the other issues that we're dealing with as well. So I do want to wrap up our time.
If I could
Believe
just,
it or not, I'm feeling really bad about it. But Victor, you had something to say.
yeah, how about I just give one action item for everybody?
Please, yes.
This is being recorded. Emails were put in the chat, and you can reach out to Cami, Benita, and Goose at any moment. Start with they're right there at that point, because everybody needs capacity and everybody needs the people power. And let's start off by reaching out to everybody here and saying, I'm here willing to help. And let's put that together. There it is. Again, send them an email and reach out to them. Sham, I'll do this last part. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And on behalf of the entire Pomona Reimagining team, I say thank you, and I invite you to join us at our next conference in March. Do check out our Pomona Reimagining website so you can look at the other videos. Feel free to rewatch this one and gather your teammates, your family members. Somos una familia right here in Pomona together. And let's work together. Set those action items. And the first one starts with contacting each other and collaborating with each other. Thank you to all of our panelists and everyone here. Sí se puede, Julie.
And I also want to say too, that if you really want to take this forward, please, please, please just write that in the chat as quickly as possible. If you want to talk about how we can break down the city into the zones and start moving forward, please, please just write your emails and we will follow up with you. We would like to do a meeting before the end of the year, and then possibly another meeting in January to really take some really concrete action step. Thank you guys, and have a fabulous evening. And thank you, panelists.